Okay, welcome to the next video in this series about getting Alexa to display things on its screens. As you would have, if you looked at the other videos, you see how much problems I've had trying to get this going and how difficult it is with the Alexa or the Amazon examples. They're just far too complicated. So I'm doing this very simply. The previous one, we just looked to see how we could just get some text on the screen. This time, I think I will just see how we can get a list of items on the screen. So hopefully looking something like this, some list like this on the screen. So we'll just jump in and talk as we go along. So we're going to start by going to the development console. I've already signed in here. These are my skills, and we'll create a new skill. Let's call it Apple List, and we're going to create a Alexa hosted skill. That means you don't need to sign in or have accounts or anything, and create the skill. There is source boss skill here, which says about the APL language, but if you look at that again, that's very complicated, but you might be able to understand at the end of this video. So we'll start with the Hello World skill, and we'll continue with the template. I'll take a few minutes to generate, so I'll just pause the video. And when it's generated the template like that, you end up in the, well, hopefully familiar to you, Amazon Build Console. First thing we're going to do is we're going to change the invocation. Okay, it's actually, sometimes that comes up with change me. This time it's actually got Apple List as our invocation. So we'll start by saying open Apple List. The other thing we need to do is we need to change the interfaces and tell our Apple that we're actually using the Alexa presentation language. So we'll be sending those commands to our screen. So I've also selected Hub Landscape Small here for smaller echo, show 5s. Note this display interface here is switched off, and leave it so. We'll save those interfaces and we'll build the model. While we're building the model, we'll just have a quick look at the interaction model and the intents the user can say, the utterances the user can say. So the user can say something like, hello, how are you? To kick off this hello world intent, and that's the one we'll modify for our code. So the quick build's done, and we can now start looking at our code. So we go to the code tab here, and I've got this document which I'll make available to everybody, which talks you through what I'm doing. We'll see that we've created the skill, we've chosen the hello world, we've checked the invocation. My previous video mentioned here, which just might explain a bit more, and we've selected the APL interface and saved and rebuild. So now our device or our program knows that the Alexa device we're talking to has got a screen because the information is sent to us in the reply and the request in this context, system, device, supported interfaces, Alexa presentation APL. So we can check that for that in our code, and if it has, then we can send it information to put on the screen. If not, we can just drop back into the normal voice interface. Now this is the APL code that we're going to use here. So we've got this information. It's going to be an Alexa text list. We're going to have a title. You can say these things to me, a subtitle, and then a list of items that it should hopefully show as our list. Now I'm going to need that, so I'll just copy that for now. And the full response that our code sends back to the device is here as now. So this document, this APL document is in a document with a token and an APL render document type, all in these directives here as part of the response. So we need to do a few things to add that APL code to our code. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a new file called list items called JSON, and we'll just paste all that in. We'll save that. So turn to our function. We're going to modify, we're going to add a few things at the top of the code first of all that we need. So the first thing we're going to need is the function that enables us to see whether we've got that supported device or not. So we'll just add that. Where should we put this? We'll put it on these here somewhere. That's the first thing. The next thing we'll need to do is we're going to load that JSON document we've just created. We're going to load in. We're going to use the load APL function to do that. That uses the JSON library, so we need to import the JSON libraries as well. So I'll just copy those and paste those in under here. So save that. And we're going to use this. We're going to use an add directive command to add the render document directive. So we can copy that and paste that in there as well. So, doesn't like that. Let's paste it in up here. That's better. So the top of our code should look something like this. We should have our supported interfaces, the JSON, the APL presentation, and our function. All of those are there. Supported interfaces, import JSON, render document directive, and the load APL document. Okay, so save that. So our code should look like this. At the top of our code, we've loaded in these functions and the libraries we need. Now what we're going to do is in our hello intent, we're going to replace the return code after the speak output with this piece of code here. What it's going to do is it's going to check to see whether we've got a screen, and if it has got a screen, we'll add this, use the add directive to add the document that we need, the APL document we need. If it doesn't have a screen, it will just say you don't have a screen. So we'll just copy this piece of code and paste that below our hello world intent. Replace all that return. Yeah. And my tabs are all wrong, but seems to work this time. Let's just check with the, I'll just check this. It's correct first of all. Okay, so I've now just checked all my tabs working right. So we'll just save and deploy the code. That shouldn't take long to deploy. We'll just show you again that we're going to load this document, this list items document here, if we've got a screen. So that seems to have deployed, 312, 312. I'll go to test and enable the testing, and we'll open Apple list. Well, that's always a good sign.
Say hello or help.
Which
would you like to try?
That's just the intent that has run. We haven't run any APL code at the moment, but just to show you where we know we've got a supported devices, because we've got this runtime max version, so it knows it's running it from my PC. Nothing on the screen yet. So now if I type hello, hit return.
Hello world.
We now get our list on our devices. Here's our title, here's our subtitle, and here's the list of devices that we've got. So that's just brilliant. So you can stop there if you want to, or if you want to, just carry on a bit further, and we'll see what happens, what we've got at the moment. Oh, you can also not only just test it on one device, you can see it on different screens as well. So let's go to the test. Turn off the skill I/O. Choose a small hub. I'll restart my session, but that's all right. If I type in open Apple list.
Welcome.
Okay,
you
nothing
can say hello or help.
Occurs
hello world.
Until we get the hello world, and well, it's actually not that bad on the list either, is it? So okay, maybe the font size would be different, you want colors or whatever, but that's for another video. Now what we have got, of course, is we've got this text. Our data that we display is part of the code, so ideally we want to separate the data from the presentation code. So let's try this. We're going to refer to a payload. That's, if you notice what you saw before, there was a payload in the render document directive. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to split those out. So I'm going to take out the data I think these are just slightly different lists to show it's working. We've got high at the top then, and we're going to put that into a JSON file called text list data. So we'll go back to the code, create a new folder. We'll call it text list data.json. Create the file. And paste all that code in. So we'll save that. So now instead of picking up all the items from this in here, we're going to pick it up from a different file. Okay. Now to pick that up, we're going to pick that up from our data sources which we saw before. So we're going to change our render document directive to load this APL, this text list data JSON that we've just had. No, we've still got the document file there. We'll do something about that in a bit. So our render document directive here is replaced by this code. I'll just tab everything across. And save that. So we'll start off just by referring to the header title and the subtitle before adding any more list items. So we're going to change our list item JSON to pick up the header title and the subtitle from this text list data that we've just created. So we'll just copy this and replace this as the list items JSON. So we go list item JSON, though we've still got the import and the main template and things at the top, but this time we're referring to the header title and the subtitle from what's generated in our text list data. Later, of course, we can pick up those whatever list items we want from the same text list data JSON. So we'll save that and deploy, and let's check what's next while we're waiting for that to deploy. Okay, well, here it says it works. But what we're going to do next is we're going to import the list. So let's just check that this all works first of all. Deployment was successful. We'll go back to the test. Open, I can't spell Apple, Apple list. And if you remember,
Welcome.
I swapped the order of the screens. So if I type in hello
world,
it's worked. And this time we've got hello, how are you? Say hi world. Is that different from what we had before? Looks like it. That's what I've got there in the text. Okay, so now let's import the list items from a different file as well. So we'll just modify the list items JSON code again. Go to the code. Change the list item JSON code. See, each time it's getting a bit smaller and a bit neater, isn't it? So we're going to pick up the list items from the text list data. Save that. Deploy. And I think these were in a different order anyway, so we'll just check what we should see. Okay, this one's got the different order. Let's see whether that works. It's now deployed. Try it with an Apple list.
welcome. You can say hello or help.
Just try hi this time and see what happens.
Hello world.
Still getting the same speech output, but this time we've got our different response because it's picked up the other list. Brilliant. Okay. But of course your code might be producing dynamic data. So how do we get the data if it's generated from our code? Well, I've just got a little function here I've created that generates some data source for us. So I've called it generate data source. And what we're going to do, what it does is we pass it a list of items. It goes through the items and appending those to a list called item list. Each one has got the primary text followed by the item, which we saw in the JSON before. So it would then return a generated list with I've added a header title and a subtitle, and the list of items to show has now been generated from whatever information has been passed to this function. So let's add this function to the top of our code. Back to the code. This is lambda function. Where should we put this? We'll put this here. We'll save that. And of course we're going to need to call this somewhere. So we're going to pass it a list of items, say hi, hello, good morning. And it's going to generate the data source that's going to look like this. With those primary texts in that we saw. So now let's create a new list. We'll add that after the if gets supported. So if we've got a screen, we'll add the new items. And then, of course, what we're going to do is, from our data sources, we're going to call that function. So the data source, instead of now picking up a fixed file, is going to run a function that's going to be passed this code. Oh, they might be Word. I'll just check they're all right. Oh, sometimes it does annoy me that that occurs when you do some adding of text. Just check it's the right quotes and not Word document quotes. Okay, so we'll deploy, save it and deploy. And we'll just see whether there's anything else we need to do. Oh, yes, of course we need to change the list items JSON as well, so that it picks up the generated list items and not the data list that we had before. So list items JSON. It's just the items. Oh, missing some brackets. Failed to pick them up. Save. And of course now we don't need this text list data, of course, at all. We're not referring to that. Everything is being now generated, well, apart from a few statements generated from our code. So we're deploying, and there's a bit of explanation in my notes what's going on. So with any luck, we should last deploy. Oh, not the build tab, sorry, test tab. Open Apple list.
Welcome. You can say hello or help.
And we'll have a look at say hello. Okay, still got the same speech output, but now we've got good morning, which is one of the things I added. So I hope you found that useful and helps you get through some of the hurdles, the initial hurdles of getting APL running on your screens.